I am a woman in my early 30s, seemingly ordinary and accommodating to everyone around me. My friends would describe me as a reliable one, always ready with a sympathetic ear and homemade cookies for their troubles. My Instagram feed is a carefully curated collection of weekend hikes, my small but thriving herb garden, and the occasional selfie with my rescue cat, Milo. To the casual observer, I'm just another millennial trying to balance a marketing career with the endless pursuit of work-life harmony. My relationship with my family seemed normal until about 3 years ago. We weren't exceptionally close, but we maintained the standard holiday gatherings and occasional Sunday dinners that American families are supposed to have. My dad, Richard Caldwell, built his construction company from nothing into a regional powerhouse in the Pacific Northwest. My mother, Diana, played the perfect corporate wife, hosting dinners for clients and maintaining their sprawling lakeside home outside Seattle. My older brother, James, followed in Dad's footsteps, joining the business straight out of college and positioning himself as the heir apparent. And then there was me, Alexandra Caldwell, the daughter who disappointed them all by choosing marketing over the family business. Creative types don't build empires, my father would say, with that particular smile that never quite reached his eyes. I learned to laugh it off, to accept my place as a family's black sheep. It seemed like a small price to pay for pursuing my own dreams. I began noticing strange behaviors when my grandmother Ruth passed away. Grandma Ruth had always been my greatest ally in the family, the only one who defended my choice to forge my own path. Your grandfather and I started with nothing but grit in each other, she would tell me. The real family legacy isn't that building with your father's name on it, it's having the courage to build something of your own. After her funeral, I expected a standard reading of the will. Instead, my father announced that Grandma had made her wishes clear to him and that everything would be handled privately. When I asked to see the will, he patted my shoulder condescendingly. Don't worry about all that legal mumbo-jumbo, Lexi, we're taking care of it. What they didn't realize about me was that I had expertise in corporate communications and crisis management. Behind my casual cardigans and friendly demeanor, I'd spent years helping multinational companies navigate their most sensitive PR disasters. I've sat across from CEOs caught in scandals and politicians facing career-ending revelations. I know how to read between lines, how to spot the subtle tells when someone is constructing a narrative rather than telling the truth. And my father's eyes told me everything I needed to know. I started asking gentle questions about Grandma's estate. Dad deflected. Mom changed the subject. James became uncharacteristically interested in his phone whenever I brought it up. So I did what any good strategist would do, I retreated to gather intelligence. 3 phone calls later, I had discovered that my grandmother's longtime attorney had retired suddenly, right after her death. His replacement, conveniently, was my father's golf buddy. 5 more calls revealed that Grandma Ruth had amended her will just 2 weeks before she died, while hospitalized for the stroke that eventually took her life. The most disturbing revelation came from Meredith, my grandmother's home health aide. Your grandmother kept talking about some special plans she had for you, Meredith told me over coffee. Something about funding your dreams. She was very specific about it, even when the medication made her confused about other things. I thanked Meredith, maintained my pleasant smile, and drove straight to the county record's office. What I found confirmed my worst suspicions. My grandmother had indeed created a trust specifically for me. According to the original filing, she had set aside nearly $2 million proceeds from her late husband's life insurance that she'd invested wisely over decades. The trust was designed to help me start my own marketing agency, a dream I'd confided in her but had never had the capital to pursue. But the amended will, signed with a shaky hand, I barely recognized as my grandmother's, directed everything to my father, to distribute as he sees fit for the good of the family. That night, I sat in my apartment staring at the copies of both documents. Milo purred in my lap as tears of both grief and rage slid down my cheeks. This wasn't just about the money, though the theft of $2 million was certainly significant. This was about my grandmother's last wishes being ignored, about my father's breathtaking entitlement, about the casual way they all assumed I would simply accept whatever scraps they decided to throw my way. I discovered their conspiracy when I received an accidental text from my brother meant for my father. Lexi's still asking about the will. Think she suspects? Should we give her something to shut her up? My father's response came quickly, nothing in writing. Verbal promise only. 5 OK max if she pushes. They intended to steal my inheritance, placate me with a fraction of what was rightfully mine, and continue treating me as a family afterthought. In their minds, I was exactly what they'd always believed: too soft, too artistic, too female to deserve a real place at the Caldwell table. That night, something shifted inside me. The accommodating daughter they knew disappeared, replaced by something colder and more calculated. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror, water dripping from my freshly washed face. They have no idea who they're dealing with, I whispered to my reflection. While maintaining my naive young woman facade, I began gathering evidence. I scheduled lunch with my grandmother's former attorney, expressing concern about his sudden retirement. After an hour of careful conversation and 2 martinis, he confided that he'd been pressured to step aside. Your father made it clear that if I didn't cooperate, he'd ensure I never worked in Seattle again. His hands shook slightly as he said it. I nodded sympathetically and asked if he had kept any records of my grandmother's original intentions. He hesitated, then slipped me a business card with a storage unit number written on the back. I've been practicing law for 40 years, he said quietly. I keep backups of everything. Next, I reached out to Meredith again, this time asking if she would be willing to sign an affidavit about my grandmother's state of mind and the conversations they'd had about her plans for me. She agreed immediately. Your grandmother was the kindest person I've ever cared for, she said. What they're doing isn't right. I carefully began to assemble my case, consulting discreetly with a trust attorney recommended by a college friend. If what you're showing me is accurate, she said after reviewing my documents, this is textbook undue influence. The timing of the amendment, your grandmother's medical condition, the relationship between the parties. But going after your own family in court will be brutal. Are you prepared for that? I thought about my father's dismissive smirk, my mother's practiced indifference, my brother's willingness to treat me as an inconvenience to be managed. They stopped being family the moment they decided to steal from me, I replied. But a direct legal confrontation wasn't my style. In crisis management, we're taught to leverage pressure points to find the most efficient path to resolution. Taking my family to court would be expensive, public, and potentially damaging to the business my grandfather and father had built. I wanted justice, not destruction. That's when I remembered Marcus Winters. Marcus had been my father's business partner in the early days, before a bitter falling out 10 years ago. The official story was that Marcus had wanted to take the company in an unethical direction, and my principal father had bought him out to protect the Caldwell name. But I'd overheard enough whispered arguments between my parents to suspect there was more to it. Finding Marcus wasn't difficult. A quick LinkedIn search revealed he now ran a smaller but successful construction company, specializing in eco-friendly commercial buildings. His company biography mentioned his commitment to transparent business practices, a pointed contrast to my father's operation. I sent him a carefully worded email requesting a meeting to discuss a family matter with business implications. His response came within hours. Ms. Caldwell, I've wondered when one of Richard's children might reach out. I'm available tomorrow at 2 p.m. Marcus Winters wasn't what I expected. Based on my father's description of him as a shark in businessman's clothing, I'd imagined someone slick and intimidating. Instead, the man who greeted me in his modest office was silver-haired and soft-spoken, with laugh lines around his eyes and a firm handshake. Alexandra, he said warmly, you look just like your grandmother. Please, have a seat. I perched on the edge of a comfortable chair, suddenly nervous. Thank you for meeting me, Murdoch Winters. Marcus, please. And I should be thanking you. I followed your career from a distance. That campaign you designed for Seattle Children's Hospital was brilliant. You've inherited Ruth's creativity. The unexpected compliment caught me off guard. No one in my family had ever acknowledged my professional accomplishments. My grandmother is actually why I'm here, I said, opening my portfolio to reveal the documents I gathered. She died 3 months ago, and I have reason to believe my father altered her will while she was incapacitated. Marcus's expression darkened as I laid out the evidence. When I finished, he was silent for a long moment. I wish I could say I'm surprised, he finally said. But this is entirely consistent with the Richard Caldwell I know. He gestured to a framed photo on his desk to younger men standing proudly in front of a construction site. Your father and I built that company together. We were like brothers once. What happened? I asked, though I suspected I already knew. Marcus sighed heavily. The official story is that I wanted to cut corners, use substandard materials to increase our profit margins. Richard positioned himself as the ethical one who couldn't abide such practices. And the truth? The exact opposite. I discovered your father had been bribing building inspectors, using materials that didn't meet code on several major projects. When I confronted him, he offered me a choice: take a buyout and keep quiet, or he would make sure I went down while he walked away clean. He had leverage over you, I guessed. Marcus nodded. I was going through a divorce. My finances were a mess. I had children in college. He knew I couldn't afford a legal battle, and he had documentation that made it look like I had approved the substandard materials. His jaw tightened. Your father has always been very good at creating paper trails that tell the story he once told, just like the amended will with my grandmother's shaky signature. I thought, why are you telling me all this? I asked. Aren't you worried I'll tell him? Marcus smiled sadly. Alexandra, you wouldn't be sitting here if you were still loyal to your father. Besides, the statute of limitations has passed on those old projects. Richard can't hurt me anymore professionally, at least. The way he added that qualification made me curious. But he can hurt you in other ways. A shadow crossed Marcus's face. Let's just say your father knows things about my personal life that I've worked hard to keep private. Nothing illegal, just private. I nodded, understanding completely. My father collected people's secrets like valuable coins, saving them for when they might be useful. I'm planning to confront my family at the annual Caldwell reunion next month, I said. Returning to the matter at hand, I have enough evidence to challenge the will in court, but I'd rather resolve this privately. I'm hoping the threat of legal action and public scandal will be enough. You're underestimating your father, Marcus warned. He won't back down easily, especially not if it means admitting wrongdoing. That's why I'm here, I said, meeting his eyes directly. I need leverage, something more immediate than the threat of a lengthy court battle. And I think you might know what that is. Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying me with new interest. You're not at all what your father described. He always painted you as a soft one, the dreamer who couldn't hack it in the real business world. I smiled thinly. That perception has served me well. People reveal much more when they think you're harmless. He laughed, a genuine, appreciative sound. You're definitely Ruth's granddaughter. His expression grew serious again. What exactly are you asking for, Alexandra? Information, I said simply. And possibly your presence at the reunion. I've been specifically uninvited, you see. My father texted last week telling me not to come, family only, he said, though I noticed my brother's new girlfriend is welcome. I suspect he knows I've been asking questions. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, absently turning a pen between his fingers. Finally, he opened a drawer and pulled out a small flash drive. 3 years ago, an employee at Caldwell Construction came to me with concerns about a major project, the Lakeside Towers development. He'd been ordered to falsify environmental impact data. When he refused, he was fired. He brought me copies of the original reports and the falsified versions. He placed the flash drive on the desk between us. I've sat on this information because using it meant collateral damage to innocent people, to employees who would lose their jobs if Caldwell Construction went under. I reached for the drive, my heart pounding. I don't want to destroy the company. I just want what's mine. And for my father to recognize that he can't simply rewrite the rules whenever it suits him. And if he refuses? Then I'll do what's necessary, I said, surprised by the steel in my own voice. Marcus nodded slowly. The reunion is at the lake house, yes? Next Saturday. Yes? I'll be there, he said. But not as your weapon, Alexandra. As a witness. What happens between you and your family should be your decision alone. I left Marcus's office with the flash drive secure in my pocket and a strange mixture of dread and anticipation building in my chest. For the next 2 weeks, I prepared meticulously, reviewing documents, rehearsing what I would say, and steeling myself for the confrontation to come. The night before the reunion, my phone buzzed with another text from my father, Lexi. I thought I made it clear the reunion is for immediate family only this year. We have business matters to discuss. We'll call you next week. I didn't respond. Instead, I texted Marcus to confirm our plan. His reply was simple. I'll meet you at the coffee shop on Lake Drive at noon. Are you sure about this? Absolutely, I typed back. That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about my grandmother, about how she'd always believed in me when no one else in the family did. I remembered her telling me once, sometimes, Lexi, the most powerful thing a woman can do is simply show up where she's not expected, and refuse to leave until she's heard. Tomorrow, I would honor that advice. The morning of the reunion dawned bright and clear, one of those perfect Seattle summer days, when the mountains stand sharp against the blue sky and the lake sparkles like scattered diamonds. I dressed carefully in a simple navy dress and pearl earrings that had been a gift from my grandmother. Professional, polished, but not trying to heart exactly the image I wanted to project. At the coffee shop, Marcus was waiting in a corner booth, looking distinguished in a light gray suit. When he saw me, he stood and offered an encouraging smile. You look ready for battle, he observed. I feel like I might throw up, I admitted. He chuckled. I'd be worried if you didn't. Confronting family is never easy, even when they've wronged you. He hesitated, then added, there's something you should know before we go in there. Your father didn't just push me out of the business because of the building code violations. It was also because I knew about your grandmother's original plans for her estate. I stared at him, stunned. What? Ruth came to me about 5 years ago, asking for advice about setting up a trust for you. She was so proud of your independence, your determination to make your own way. His expression softened. I helped her find the right financial advisors, the right attorneys. Richard found out and Well, that was the beginning of the end of our partnership. The revelation landed like a physical blow. My father hadn't just stolen my inheritance after my grandmother's death, he'd been actively working against her wishes for years. Why didn't you tell me this before? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Because I wasn't sure you were ready to hear how deep your father's betrayal goes, Marcus said gently. And because I wanted you to be certain about confronting him on your own terms, not fueled by fresh anger. I took a deep breath, letting the information settle within me. Strangely, it didn't increase my rage, it clarified my purpose. This wasn't just about money. It was about honoring my grandmother's intentions and standing up for myself in a family that had never respected my autonomy. I'm ready, I said, rising from my seat. Let's go. The drive to my parents' lake house took 20 minutes. Neither Marcus nor I spoke much, both lost in our own thoughts. As we turned onto the private road leading to the property, I could see cars already parked in the circular driveway, my brother's Range Rover, my uncle's Mercedes, several vehicles I didn't recognize. Marcus reached over and briefly squeezed my hand. Remember, whatever happens in there, you've already won by choosing to stand up for yourself. I nodded, too nervous now for words. We parked at the end of the driveway. Through the large picture windows, I could see figures moving inside the family gathering I'd been explicitly told to avoid. Taking a deep breath, I stepped out of the car and smoothed my dress. Marcus came around to join me, offering his arm. Shall we? I took it, drawing strength from his calm presence. Together, we walked up the stone path to the front door. Instead of knocking, I used my key, a small act of defiance. A reminder that this was my family home too. The conversation in the living room died abruptly as we entered. My father, in the middle of what appeared to be a toast, froze with his glass halfway to his lips. My mother's practiced smile slipped for just a moment before she recovered. My brother James actually took a step back, his eyes darting between Marcus and me with undisguised alarm. Alexandra, my father said, his voice tight with controlled anger. I believe I made it clear that today was for immediate family only. I smiled pleasantly. And I believe my grandmother made it clear that I was to receive a trust fund of $2 million. It seems we're both dealing with disappointment today. A shocked silence fell over the room. My various aunts, uncles, and cousins exchanged uncomfortable glances. This was clearly not the family drama they had expected to witness over cocktails. But it was my father's reaction to Marcus that was truly revealing. Richard Caldwell, who prided himself on his unflappable business demeanor, had gone pale. Marcus, he said, his voice barely audible. What are you doing in my home? Marcus smiled thinly. Supporting Alexandra. She asked me to come, and I've always had a hard time saying no to a Caldwell woman. Ruth was the same way, so clear in her convictions. My father's gaze snapped back to me, a new wariness in his eyes. I could almost see the calculations happening behind them. How much did I know? What evidence did I have? What was Marcus's role in all this? Perhaps we should discuss this privately, he suggested, gesturing toward his study. No, I said firmly. I think we've had quite enough privacy around family matters. That's how we ended up with a mysteriously amended will and $2 million that vanished from my grandmother's estate. Murmurs rippled through the assembled relatives. My mother stepped forward, her social damage control instincts kicking in. Alexandra, darling, you're making a scene. Whatever concerns you have, we can address them later as a family. We are addressing them as a family, I countered. Right now, with witnesses who can ensure that everyone plays fair for once. My brother James finally found his voice. Lexi, you don't know what you're talking about. Grandma changed her mind about the trust. She wanted the money to go to the business. Really? I pulled out my phone and pulled up a photo. Is that why she was asking her home health aide about good locations for my marketing agency just 3 days before she supposedly changed her will? While she was on medication that her doctor, I nodded toward her cousin Michael, a physician who was standing uncomfortably by the fireplace, has confirmed would have made her legally incapacitated. Michael looked away, unable to meet my eyes. Another confirmation. My father's facade of control was crumbling. I could see it in the tight line of his jaw, the slight tremor in his hand as he set down his drink. The room had fallen completely silent, every family member frozen in place like actors waiting for their cue. I think, my father said slowly, his voice dangerously low, that you've misunderstood the situation entirely, Alexandra. And bringing Marcus Winters into our family home shows extremely poor judgment. Does it? I kept my voice light, conversational. I thought it was rather fitting. After all, Grandma trusted Marcus. She confided in him about her plans for my future. I took a step forward. Plans that you've known about for years, Dad? Long before she got sick. The flash of surprise in his eyes confirmed what Marcus had told me. He hadn't expected me to know that part. This is absurd, my mother interjected, glancing nervously at the other relatives. Alexandra has always had a flair for the dramatic. I'm sure we can sort this out privately. I've tried privacy, I replied. For 3 months, I've asked questions. I've requested copies of documents. I've tried to understand why my grandmother's clearly expressed wishes were ignored, and all I've gotten are dismissals and distractions. I opened my portfolio and began distributing copies of the documents. I'd gathered the original trust paperwork, my grandmother's medical records, statements from her attorney and caregiver. My relatives accepted them reflexively. Years of social conditioning making it impossible to refuse offered papers. What exactly are you hoping to accomplish here? My father demanded, making no move to take the documents I held out to him. Justice, I said simply. I want what Grandma intended me to have. I want an acknowledgement of what was done. And I want assurance that nothing like this will happen again. James let out a harsh laugh. Or what? You'll sue your own family? Create a scandal? Tear apart everything Dad and Grandpa built? I turned to him, feeling an unexpected pang of sadness. My brother and I had been close ones before he fully embraced our father's worldview. If necessary, I said quietly. But I'd rather not. That's why I'm here to give you all a chance to make this right before it goes further. My father's voice had regained its strength, its familiar note of condescension. Lexi, be reasonable. You're making accusations you can't possibly prove. Yes, your grandmother mentioned setting aside something for you, but she changed her mind. People do that, especially when they're facing their own mortality. Richard, Marcus spoke for the first time since our initial entrance. I think we both know that's not what happened. My father's attention snapped to him, eyes narrowing. You have no place in this discussion. Whatever my mother may have confided in years ago is irrelevant to her final wishes, is it? I pulled out my final piece of evidence, the flash drive Marcus had given me. Because I have documentation suggesting that altering other people's wishes is something of a pattern with you, Dad. The Lakeside Tower's environmental reports, for instance. The color drained from my father's face. Several relatives looked confused, but my uncle Robert, a major investor in the Lakeside project, suddenly seemed very interested in his shoes. I don't know what you think you have, my father said carefully, but I can assure you, the Lakeside development met all regulatory requirements. After the reports were falsified, yes. I turned the flash drive over in my fingers. The original data tells a different story. One that the Environmental Protection Agency and the City Zoning Board might find very interesting. A tense silence fell. I could almost hear the gears turning in my father's head as he calculated his options, weighed the risks, considered how many people in the room he could still control. My mother broke first. Richard, perhaps we should discuss this with Alexandra privately after all. There's nothing to discuss, he snapped, but I could hear the uncertainty beneath the bravado. He turned to me, his expression hardening. What do you want, Alexandra? Money? Is that it? You're willing to threaten your family's reputation, your brother's inheritance, everything we've built for money? Not just money, I said calmly. Recognition, respect, acknowledgement that what you did was wrong. And yes, my $2 million with interest for the 3 months you've withheld it. My father glanced at Marcus, then back to me. And if I agree to these terms, what happens to that? He nodded toward the flash drive. It stays private. Family business, handled within the family. I met his gaze steadily. I have no desire to destroy what Grandpa built. I just want what's rightfully mine, what Grandma wanted me to have. For a long moment, no one spoke. I could feel the weight of every family member's stare, some confused, some calculating, some quietly impressed. My brother James looked torn between anger and a reluctant admiration. My mother's eyes darted between my father and me, trying to gauge which way the power was shifting. Finally, my father nodded stiffly. We'll review the original trust documents. If what you say is accurate, we'll honor your grandmother's intentions. It wasn't a full surrender, but it was a start. I knew there would be attempts to negotiate, to diminish, to delay. But I also knew I'd won the crucial first battle. Thank you, I said formally. I appreciate your willingness to reconsider. I slipped the flash drive back into my pocket, a reminder that this truce was conditional. Will you be staying for dinner? My mother asked, already shifting into hostess mode. Desperate to restore normalcy, I glanced at Marcus, who gave me a subtle nod. Yes, I decided. I think we will. After all, this is a family reunion and I am family. As conversation slowly, awkwardly resumed around us, Marcus leaned close to whisper. You did well. Your grandmother would be proud. Thank you, I murmured, for everything. I should be thanking you, he replied. I've waited 10 years to see that look on Richard's face. I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in months. The battle wasn't entirely won. There would be paperwork, negotiations, probably some additional confrontations. My relationship with my parents and brother was fundamentally altered. But for the first time since my grandmother died, I felt her presence with me, her approval warming me from within. I had honored her final wishes. I had stood up for myself, and I had discovered a strength I hadn't known I possessed. The next morning, I woke to sunlight streaming through the guest room windows of my parents' lake house. For a moment, I was disoriented. It had been years since I'd stayed overnight in my childhood home. Then the events of the previous day came rushing back, and I sat up, suddenly alert. After our confrontation, the reunion had continued with a strained politeness that fooled no one. Marcus and I had stayed for dinner, enduring curious glances from relatives and my mother's overly bright conversation. My father had been notably quiet, watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Not anger, exactly, something more complex, perhaps even tinged with reluctant respect. Now, hearing movement downstairs, I dressed quickly in yesterday's clothes and prepared to face whatever came next. As I descended the stairs, I braced myself for another round of tension. Instead, I found my father alone in the kitchen, making coffee with the methodical precision that characterized everything he did. He glanced up as I entered but didn't speak. I hesitated, then moved to the cabinet for a mug, a silent statement that I belonged in this space too. "Where is everyone?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "Your mother took James and his girlfriend out on the boat. The others left last night." He poured coffee into my outstretched mug. "Then his own, Marcus?" "He went back to the city last night. He has an early meeting." I sipped the coffee, its familiar bitterness oddly comforting. "We should talk about next steps." My father nodded, gesturing toward the deck overlooking the lake. We settled into the Adirondack chairs that had occupied the same spots for as long as I could remember. Morning sunlight sparkled on the water. In the distance, a pair of kayakers glided silently across the surface. "I've been thinking about what you said," my father began, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "About recognition. Respect." I waited, knowing better than to interrupt. My father rarely apologized directly. Any concession would come wrapped in careful language. "You've built something impressive with your career," he continued. "I may not have fully acknowledged that." "No, you haven't," I agreed quietly. He sipped his coffee, then set it down deliberately on the armrest. "Your grandmother and I disagreed about many things toward the end. How to run the business, what legacy meant." He paused. "What you deserved." I felt a tightness in my throat. "She believed in me." "Yes." For the first time, he turned to look at me directly. "She was right about that, at least." It wasn't an apology, but from my father it was significant. I nodded, accepting the small olive branch. "The trust. I'll have the paperwork drawn up this week. The full amount with interest as you requested." His tone was businesslike now, more comfortable on the terrain of financial transactions than emotional ones. "Thank you." We sat in silence for several minutes, watching a family of ducks paddle near the dock. I thought about all the things I could say, accusations, questions, long-buried grievances. But something held me back. Not fear, not anymore, but a new understanding that some distances might never fully close. "Lakeside Towers," he said finally. "That information will stay private," I assured him, "as long as the environmental issues are addressed." He nodded tightly. "They will be." Another silence, less tense than before. A blue heron landed on the edge of the dock, its movements delicate and precise. My father and I watched it together, sharing perhaps our first moment of genuine peace in years. "You're more like me than either of us wanted to admit," he said eventually. "The way you handled this, it was effective." I considered this, unsure if it was a compliment or an observation. "I'm like Grandma too," I replied. "She taught me to stand up for myself, to recognize my own worth." "She would have enjoyed yesterday," he acknowledged, a ghost of a smile crossing his face. "She always did love a good confrontation. And she adored making me uncomfortable." I laughed softly, surprised by this moment of shared understanding. "She told me once that the measure of a person isn't how they behave when things are easy, but what they do when they've been wronged." My father nodded slowly. "By that measure, you've done well." He stood, collecting his empty coffee mug. "I'll have my assistant call you about the trust paperwork." He hesitated, then added, "And perhaps when that's settled we could discuss that marketing agency you've been planning. The company could use someone with your perspective." I blinked in surprise. "I'll think about it." As he turned to go inside, I remained in my chair, watching the morning light strengthen across the water. The future stretched before me, suddenly wider with possibility. My grandmother's gift would allow me to build something of my own, to chart my own course, and perhaps, in time, it might also help rebuild something I thought was irreparably broken, a family connection based on mutual respect rather than power and control. I took a deep breath of the clean lake air, feeling both lighter and stronger than I had in months. Whatever came next, I would face it on my own terms just as my grandmother had always wanted.